see a good group of people joining us. We will get started here in about 2 more minutes. Use the she, her pronouns. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Justice Impacted Task Force. I want to welcome everyone to day 3 of our UNLV Summer Institute Starter Toolkit for Serving Justice Impacted Students. I'd like to start today by acknowledging and honoring the Indigenous communities of this region. Recognize that UNLV is situated on the traditional homelands of the Nueve Southern Paiute people. We offer our gratitude for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to study, to learn, to work, and to be in community with this land. Before we get started, I have a few announcements. First, the Institute is being recorded, and all of the recordings will be made available after the Institute. Second, go ahead and please keep your microphone muted unless you're presenting or speaking to the entire group. We do welcome everyone to keep your cameras on, as I know sometimes it's helpful for presenters to be able to see some nonverbal cues, but also you're welcome to keep your camera off as well. And third, if you have questions, go ahead and enter those in the chat, and I'll be reading those to the presenters as time allows. Now, later on today, around 10:45, we will have our UNLV student panel, and you'll have the opportunity to hear from our own students about campus climate and some of the challenges facing justice impacted students. But before we get there, we have some more content to be shared by our expert presenters. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jason Bell and the rest of our fabulous presenters, who all of you, by the way, have been amazing. This has been such a great institute, and I really do appreciate all the time that you have taken to be with us, to share with us, and we've learned so much. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to hand it off. And as I say that, I'm actually not sure if Jason Bell is on the call yet. All right, correct. Jason Bell is not on the call. Is there someone else that thinks that they are scheduled to present today that wants to take the lead?
Yes, good morning. I thought Jason Bell was supposed to be here. He texted me this morning and asked me if I was ready. And I said, yeah, I think so. I mean, are we ever ready, right? So I'm surprised he's not here. I know that we at Project Rebound throughout the state have some paperwork and reports that are due right now. So maybe he's stuck with that. But anyways, doesn't matter. Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Martin Leva. I shared a little bit last week Project Rebound at Cal State San Marcos, which is in the northern part of San Diego County in California. I'm also formerly incarcerated, spent a long time in jail and prison, in addiction, alcoholism, born and raised in and around gang community and family. And there's Mr. Bell right now logging on. Good morning, Mr. Bell. You know, I mean, this was a life that kind of was the norm in my family, right? In my community, that most of the men in my family and in my community had been to jail or prison. I was released from prison in 2007. And I had interesting, because I'm talking today briefly about special populations. And my knowledge of special populations for me started while I was incarcerated, right? I had really got a critical education and what I call a non-traditional education in prison from these individuals that I call cell block intellectuals. These are individuals who are in prison, who are not part of the mainstream academic institutions if they're available in prison, but these are men and women who, you know, read books, have conversations with their peers, and really help us see the system for what the system is. And this is where my trajectory for education came from, because when I was released in 2007, I entered college. Like I shared last week, I entered college for the very first time, terrified of a college campus. I didn't know what that felt like. But lo and behold, I started doing the work, formulating programs, helping a lot of individuals stay out of prison. I established a cohort model of education for formerly incarcerated individuals, system impacted individuals. And the programs that I've helped institute have an 85% success rate, meaning 85% do not go back to jail or prison. And it's all based around this cohort model. How I survived prison is exactly how I survive academia, right? I become connected to the people who are going to help me, and I stay connected to the people who I'm going to serve and to help. And so I'm basically going to talk a little bit about special populations, and I really want, and I shared last week that I'm very story-based, so I'm going to share very short stories. But when I was in prison, I was talking to one of my fellow peers, and when this peer came to the prison I was in, he introduced himself to our group, and he is, I can't say he was, he is gay, right? And there's this very, heterosexism is very rampant inside the prison system, right? There's a lot of marginalization that happens with already marginal groups in prison. Our group decided to take him on as a brother, right? We are a Native American community in prison, very small, tight-knit, very strong community. We are one of the smallest populations in prison. And there's a lot of rules with that. But what this brother helped me understand right? After having long conversations with a Black man, another white man, another Asian, another Native American, right? I began to see age, right? I began to see disability. I began to see transgender, right? Trans women inside the prison where I was at. I began to see so many intersections of that prison living within the confines of these four walls, and all of us having to navigate. And I started to read more about these intersections. I started learning a lot from Bell Hooks, who's amazing. I started to learn, I started to read these books that are considered by our prison system in California, and I've done a little research about nationwide prisons. A lot of books that I read are banned books. Technically, I can get in trouble for reading these books or having these books in my possession, right? But when I came home from prison and started formulating these groups, these programs, I had to begin to see those intersections, right? I had to begin to see those intersections. Who am I serving? And then the intersections we don't see, right? Disabilities, we don't necessarily see disabilities. I shared last week that I have learning disabilities. Upwards of some data and research says that upwards of 80% of people in prison have a learning disability, right? Disabilities you can't even see. Addiction, you can't see addiction, but there's, we have 2.3 million people in the United States incarcerated, and 2 million of them are addicts, right? And we have to take a look at that stuff. Is if I'm bringing in a student into my program, what intersections are they bringing with them? When we think about special populations, I have to think about their trauma. So being trauma-informed care is super important. Their addictions, having addiction specialists on hand to help serve our students to the best that we can, right? Therapists and counselors, because, trauma, I think, is one of the number one things we see. I think that when I teach my classes, I often, I teach a class called Drugs and Alcohol in Society. And I have this question about gateway drugs, and everybody's like, oh, it's cigarettes, it might be marijuana, it might be alcohol, it might be all these things they come up with, but no student ever says what the real issue as a gateway drug is trauma. Right, I see Roy in the post put that. Nobody's really ever thought about that trauma. Childhood trauma causes addiction. And addiction, a lot of times, and I'm going to say two things. One, addiction and inequality are the two things that cause mass incarceration. You know, there's a lot of reasons that cause mass incarceration, but addiction and inequality, right? I mean, I know a lot of people have gone to prison for petty theft with violations because, you know, they have to find a way to make extra income because they just can't make enough money to survive, especially in California. I'm born and raised in Southern California. Good luck trying to survive out here with $15 an hour, right? And back then it was like $11 an hour. You know, I always think no wonder people are selling drugs, right? So you can't make enough at your job. 2 jobs keeps you away from your family, and it's not good for your mental health. So guess what? I'm gonna sell a little stuff here and there to try to make ends meet. Most drug dealers are not getting rich. I'll tell you that right now. They're just trying to keep their lights on. But serving these special populations, we have to take this stuff into consideration, right? Their mental health, even their physical health, right? I often think of a lot of the elders I was with in prison, right? And there's this thing they call the gray wave, right? There's more than 130,000 people age 55 or over inside the prison system right now, right? What does that cost our prison system to care for them, right? Over $9 billion a year is spent on the prison system to support elderly folks, right? By the year 2030, 1 in 3 people will be age 55 and over, by the way, right? And I often think, like, what threat do they really have against society that we continue to keep them in there? My goal is to get them out and into education. And I love seeing anybody graduate, but when you see the older folks actually fulfill the dreams that they had when they were younger, to me, there's something super beautiful about that, right? And so we have to, you know, when thinking about special populations, I often think about, my phone is blowing up right at this moment. I have to think about what we can do to serve them. What can we put on in our office at Project Rebound that's going to best serve the populations that are coming in. So I've mentioned, you know, the gay community, LGBTQ community, trans folks, which we don't see a lot of formerly incarcerated trans folks in our programs. Why? My guess is they've already been marginalized to the point where they don't trust systems, they don't trust institutions and organizations to support them, but having the right people in place to serve them, right? Elderly, even young folks. I remember I was in Chino State Prison, Kern Valley State Prison. And I went, after a long day of work, I went to go take a shower. And I remember going into the shower and there was a new person in the shower, right? You can use your imagination, grown men, we know what's up with prison, we have scars on our bodies, we've been through hell and back. But this person who was in the shower was a skinny, young, white male. And when I saw him, he was new, he looked terrified. And I asked the question, you know, this is none of my business because I'm not white, but I asked the question, I said, who's the new guy, right? He's a 17-year-old boy, 17-year-old boy in the shower with grown men, right? Think about creating programs for formerly incarcerated individuals that takes his experience into consideration. The harm, the trauma. How are we going to care for this individual so that this individual can actually succeed in education, be successful, move forward in life in this upward social mobility, right? That everything that these individuals that we go through has to be into consideration. So at Project Rebound, what we do a lot of times to address this stuff is I'm really big on mindfulness and meditation. I'm really big on social and emotional intelligence. I'm really big on restorative justice. I'm really big on trauma-informed care, but more importantly, what I like to do is I like to do like what I call justice-informed care, right? So if we're talking about sexism and somebody's been hurt by sexism, rape culture, and other things, right? We actually, I believe we have to talk about the history of sexism, because trauma tends to reproduce itself. We just teach the individual how to respond to trauma, but we don't talk about where the trauma comes from and how to begin to erase those, then it'll just continue to reproduce, right? So we were talking about trauma actually empowering people, right? Other special populations that I think is very, very important to take into consideration. The state of California recently, our governor signed a bill, AB 2147, allowing inmate or former inmate firefighters to actually get a job within forestry and within private firefighting companies, right? They have to go through an expungement. Inmate firefighters as well, especially in academia, who support formerly incarcerated individuals, that we actually tackle on the laws and policies that stop them from getting the jobs that they want, right? If we're trained in prison to fight fires, we should be forgiven and we should be able to fight fires when we come home. Other populations that I think about quite often is medical staff. There's a great documentary narrated by Forrest Whitaker called Serving Life. Serving Life is a documentary, and I recommend you watch this documentary. It's about inmate healthcare workers who are in hospice, right? Talking about the gray wave that I was just talking about, our elders in prison. A lot of times they, it's nothing sadder to me than watching an individual you see on a regular basis, an elderly man in jail, in prison, and then one day you don't see him anymore, right? Passing away. Well, the people that are caring for our elders in prison are other inmates, right? Think about what that does to their psyche. And to think that an individual can be trained in a certified nursing assistant position and then come home and not be able to get a job. This is another special population that we have to utilize, right? All their skills. We easily we could talk about all the certification program, welders, construction, plumbing, electrician, right? Because we do all that work, cooking. And it's fairly easy for us to get a job doing that when we come home. But what about our specialized populations that work in nursing, dentistry, right? They work as dental assistants. They work in firefighting, right? In California, they have underwater welding. But those specialized populations, what they're unable to get a job when they come home, us as an academic program need to utilize the skills they built on and try to help them get a job in that field, right? So I'm going to start tackling that medical licensing. And, we talked a little about licensing last week, and it's important that we as an academic institution, and we do hold power, right? We do hold power as an institution, as academic institutions, that we address these issues. I think all these issues need to be addressed. So I'm just keeping an eye on the clock real quick. But so when we think about special populations, right? And I'm gonna kind of repeat myself here, right? An individual going into prison isn't just an individual going into prison. This person comes from somewhere, has an ethnic and racial background, classism, racism, sexism, all the intersections that we could talk about. These individuals, I wish that most individuals that went into prison, and I wish we stopped calling them prison and start calling them therapeutic communities, because if we can actually make them better while they're there, so that they come out and they never have to go back to prison, that would be beautiful. That would be an ideal system for me, but that system doesn't exist, right? Most people that I've seen go to prison, let's just say for addiction, and this happens a lot. This happens actually a lot. They go into prison because of addiction, and then all of a sudden they learn how to be violent. And then when we release them and we never address their addiction, now they're addicts who know how to act out violently, right? We should be completely doing the opposite, but we're not. And the small group of the percentage of people in prison actually doing the self-help stuff, I think California has really um, began to see this, right? So there's more academic and certification opportunities for folks in prison. And I know a lot of people through correspondence have shared that they are participating in these programs. So it's working because they're incentivized, right? The more certificates or degrees you get, the less time you get off on your sentence, right? These are stuff that California's doing. And I think that we need to utilize that coming home, saying, you know, we have programs within our community college, and our community college is directly tied to a university, right? There's a memorandum of understanding or a bridge already built that says you graduate from that community college, you have a direct guaranteed admission to this university. And that's where we're at. We're at the CSU system. You know, we have 4 or 5 community colleges that we pull our students from, and all those community colleges have specialized programs for formerly incarcerated folks, but that we're beginning to address all the intersections, right? That your experience, who you are, and everything you bring with you is welcomed here in our institution, right? And that means, and I'll be quite honest and frank about this. And you know, I always tell folks that want to start a program, and I've actually helped a number of community colleges start programs for formerly incarcerated folks, that you really have to check your reason for why you're doing this, right? You got to care for the individuals that are coming in. You got to understand the system in which they're exiting, and the system that actually took them to the prison, right? Like I shared a little about a system of inequality, pushes people into the prison system, addiction, trauma, right? Sometimes, and for me, it was a badge of honor. First time I walked in juvenile hall, I had people in my family like telling me what to do next. Same thing when I entered the community, a county jail. Same thing when I entered the prison system, right? And the men in my family didn't know any better. They didn't know any different, right? And I think that we need to work on the individual that works with the family, works with the community, because then that's how systemic change happens, right? That's how we can change our systems of our family, the dynamics of our family. And the goal for me, working with special populations, working with just anybody who wants to come to school who's formerly incarcerated, the goal for me is that the generation after them, the generation that follows them, has a better foundation than what they had. That's the goal, right? And that I do my work, right? So that I do my work, so that I know, well, I would say that I know, that I feel 100% comfortable working with those intersections, women, and all the intersections that women bring, trans folks, gay folks, elderly, young kids, everything you can think about, people with disabilities, that I had better understand myself so that I can be reflective in the care and empathy and respect and support I give them, right? That I do my work, and that I really honestly feel that anybody doing this work really does the work on themselves, right? Because that right there is contagious. You know, I think I've had some pretty good success because I embody this Chicano macho dude, tattoos everywhere. And then when I sit in front of a formerly incarcerated individual, no matter who they are, no matter what gender, no matter what sexual orientation, the only thing I have in mind is what's best for them. What do you need? How can I serve you? And if they say, I don't know, cool, let's explore that I don't know, because that I don't know actually is full of stuff that they need. They just never have learned how to express their needs, right? I take you back to that time I stepped off the bus and onto a college campus for the first time, and I froze in place, right? The December before that, I was in a prison riot, and I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly where to go. I knew exactly how to defend myself or defend my people. But when I walked onto a college campus, I froze. It's because I didn't know those feelings. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to say, can you assist me with something? because I was taught that that's weak. And if not, that's the strongest thing I ever did was I finally asked for help. That's that's the bravest thing I ever did. And when individuals who are formerly incarcerated, or even if they're not, if they're, the children of incarcerated folks, right? 2.3 million people incarcerated in the United States, and 2.1 million of them have children. That means 2.1 children have an incarcerated parent. Those children a lot of times don't know how to ask for help too, right? Observational learning. If they've never seen somebody ask for help, they're not going to learn how to ask for help. And so when even when system impacted students come into my office and they need something, but they don't know how to ask for it, I'm prepared to serve them too, right? I mean, it's not just about the individual in prison or coming out of prison. It's about their family, it's about their community, and it's about what our institution can provide, right? What we can provide. And so I think that I'll leave it at that. Looking at time, I'm going to stick around to the end. So if anybody has questions later on, I can be more than happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot in my conversation that when we think about the intersections and the special population of people that we serve, formerly incarcerated people are not in one box, right? We are so different. We are so different. And, but I guarantee that the goal is the same. We just want to stay out of prison. We want to live a good life. We want to provide. That's the goal, right? But we have so many other things, traumas, and even historical trauma. I mean, my parents taught me some stuff I wish I would have never learned, but that was what their parents taught them, right? And we have to unlearn that. And doing work on myself is doing the work on my parents. You know what I'm saying? So it helps me understand them better. It helps me understand my life better. And I never want to reach the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs when he talks about self-actualization. I never want to get there. Matter of fact, I think self-actualization is more a community thing rather than an individual thing. But I'm going to start getting into my psychological lecture piece, and I don't want to do that. But anyways, I'm going to leave it with that. But thinking about special populations, you really have to think about the intersections of the person that is sitting in front of you and everything you can provide for that person and everything they bring to the table. So thank you for allowing me to share. Like I said, I'm going to stick around to the end, and I will be here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Martin. I do really appreciate you asking all of us to think about why we're doing this. Are we really prepared to do this and do no harm? Definitely some good things to think about. Well, Jason Bell, welcome. We're glad that you're able to join us.
I am so sorry about the login. I was having a little technical difficulty. I had the wrong email plugged in, and I'm looking for a link that's not there. But I made it though, Sonny. Thanks for this, and everybody that got up this morning to attend. And Martine, the topic, that intersectionality stuff. I mean, I'm so glad that you always make sure that we recognize that, because I know one thing about this work. Oftentimes we get caught up into these binary ideas about, what can some folks do for us, or what can we do for them? They might be thinking, what can we do for them? But there's so much kind of intermesh, like a cohesiveness that takes place in this work. And I'm so glad, number one, that I don't have to do some kind of a comprehensive recap of the last 2 days, because I thought I was going to be able to do that. But there's so many layers of this stuff that I'm just glad you recorded it, because I would have done it. I would have completely butchered that. But if we have to kind of summarize quickly, I would definitely say that there's benefits all the way across the board. I mean, as far as students go, there's the academic benefits easy, but the pro-social benefits that Martine is talking about, that the kind of intersectionality learning and understanding takes place also on this side of the wall too. It has to continue. Professional networking has to continue. And then as far as benefits to the campus, You actually campuses with the inclusion of formerly incarcerated folks in that variety that Martine that you're talking about. We actually become experts in fields, academic fields all the way across the board, everything from sociology to urban studies to political science. I mean, you name it. People are calling on us all the time for advice. You know, sure, there's books been written on some of these things, but you can't get it like you can firsthand from folks that have lived that. And oftentimes they're calling, even on IRB committees, when they're doing research and they're writing research, they've called us in to guide them about things that might cross the line and violate, human subjects. So there's all kind of benefits. And then just simply, like in the words of one of my colleagues, Doris Finn, who's here, I mean, there's basic similarities by just strong inter-campus support. I mean, all the way across the board, from pre-admissions to academic advising, financial aid, the registrar's office, bursars. And there's communities that need those supports all the time. The veterans need those kind of supports.
Yeah.
AB 540 students need those supports. And justice involved students are just another nuanced group that sometimes may need some support. So let's be there for them. I mean, I think it's our civic duty kind of to step up and be around for folks that may need a little help. Like Martine, like you mentioned, you knew what to do in a riot, but stepping on that college campus was a kind of a new culture that was rare and you didn't understand at the time. But I bet you now you're shining and they recognize you in San Marcos and all the way across the state of California for your academic expertise. So we just want to share that.
Yeah, and one last thing I just want to add in there, Jason, because you bring up a really good point, is that when working with formerly incarcerated people, and I don't really even need to say this because I think everybody knows, right? They bring an expertise to your campus. They bring an expertise to your classroom if you're teaching. They bring, so I teach this summer program for a cohort model of education for formerly incarcerated people, and the topic is an introduction to justice studies.
Come back to us, Martine.
Experts sitting in the chairs, and that personal experience, once you bring us out, you got shining stars throughout your classroom and your campus, right? We just need to foster that care and that confidence, that self-esteem, that self-worth. And they're powerful people with a great experience that, people do research on it, but they've never lived it. Well, these people lived it. They should be doing the research too.
That's right. Now I know another layer of this work and support with our students is that housing piece, and sometimes it can be complicated, but we're fortunate enough to have a Rebound scholar that has a rich history in understanding that and has made some personal choices in that and has done some huge efforts with cities and counties to establish those supports for our students. So Mr. George Turner, you want to shed a little light before we dive into this powerful student panel that we have? I know I'm itching to hear too.
Okay, excuse me. Good morning, everybody. I'm George Turner, Director, Project Rebound, San Francisco State University, lecturer in Counseling and Sociology Department, Registered Addiction Specialist, Executive Director and founder of Fat Chance Community Services. Today, I plan to provide an overview about off-campus housing modalities in the Bay Area for formerly incarcerated students. The Bay Area is a term used to refer to 9 counties. The most heavily populated cities in the Bay Area are San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. In these 3 cities, the population combined is over 2 million. The cost of living in the Bay Area varies. Average rent for a decent studio or 1-bedroom can begin anywhere between $3,000 and $7,000. Prospective tenants must provide proof of employment, credit check, and some landlords are asking for proof that your income is 3 times the rent. The Project Rebound population are most often folks that are returning to the community with minimal savings, unemployed, and a history of being system involved. This makes finding affordable housing opportunities even more challenging. The most utilized housing models for formerly incarcerated adults returning to the community are housing linked to mental health and substance use disorder treatment. In this model, the focus is providing social support and a reentry program. Men and women are empowered to attain self-sufficiency, continued recovery, and the realization of their ultimate potential. This model provides groups and individual support to educate students concerning addiction, relapse prevention, mental health, and assistance establishing a compliant medication regime. The educational services in this particular model provide basic computer skills, GED preparation, 5 Keys Charter School, which is an opportunity to acquire a high school diploma, academic brush up, typing and keyboard skills, and money management, an opportunity to learn how to manage money independently or manage money with a payee. They also provide housing workshops, and these housing workshops provide information on where to look for permanent housing and how to apply for housing lotteries. A housing lottery is a way to access housing through usually government-sponsored and nonprofit. It's a way to access housing that's below market. And below market just means you'll pay less than the average renter in your area. Daily mandatory groups are required in this model, as well as wellness, which is exercise, 20, 30 minutes, or daily walks. These services are also offered inside because there are certain organizations that work inside the institutions, and they prepare them for the services that's going to be offered once they're released, an extension of the treatment that they became involved in substance abuse in the institutions. For example, our students have participated in both long and short-term, they've had both long and short-term commitments in this model. Some of our students who were lifers or did long-term prison terms expressed that this model made it difficult to attend school due to program obligations. And most of the lifers, due to their group training inside the institution, are better prepared to facilitate these groups than most. This model is a good model for folks in early recovery. However, it is not the best use of time for folks returning to the community after longer prison terms. Most students look forward to the ability to move forward with their lives with less restrictions. However, moving forward in this particular model means to require permanent housing upon availability. The next modality focuses on state and federal parole-funded correctional system. Reentry programs and services reduce recidivism by focusing on higher risk offenders, targeting factors that contribute to criminal behavior and using cognitive behavior treatment. Services include case management, groups and individual sessions, substance abuse counseling, job readiness training, skill development, and referrals to community resource sources. Students in this model that are referred from the Bureau of Prisons are required to pay 25% of their income to the organization for services and rent. However, state referrals, there's no fee for housing for up to a year. It has also been reported that there have been concerns with students gaining access to Wi-Fi, computer rooms, and an area to study. Also, there are concerns with gaining permission to leave the facility for appointments because of the heavy structure. In the Bay Area, we are working with organizations, staff toward establishing an updated approach to these concerns. It has been reported that Las Vegas Metro Police Department opened a successful in-custody reentry program in Clark County Detention Center. The tools used were level of service inventory revised, criminal thinking scales, and victim impact scales. Congratulations to the Las Vegas Police Department. Housing for system-involved individuals on probation has a different approach. And the requirements vary, as you notice, the requirements vary from program to program. The general approach for San Francisco adult probation is San Francisco adult probation strives to integrate the National Institute of Corrections 8 evidence-based principles for effective intervention. Potential students on probation in San Francisco referral method must undergo correctional offender management profiling for alternative sanctions, referred to as COMPASS. And this is completed by the PO. COMPASS is an assessment tool to gauge the level of risk and needs of the student under supervision of the criminal justice system. The PO must also provide an individual treatment and my words is running together, rehabilitation plan, referred to as the ITRP. Thank you for your consideration with that. Potential students must attend a minimum of 2 groups per week and become case managed and remain in compliance with their legal obligations. Housings range from single resident occupancies, SROs, to sharing living arrangements in dorm-like settings. In this model, depending on student needs, mental health, substance abuse history, and bed space available, it'll determine what type of housing will be offered. Now, some of these single rooms are in hotels, and living alone may or may not be the best atmosphere for reentry students. First off, it may take, actually what we found is the most successful students are actually in a position where they receive peer support and they're in an environment where people are doing positive things. The concern with some of the hotels, they're nice, some of them are refurbished, it's a single room. However, when you step outside, some of everything is going on. It could be a trigger back to criminal activity or substance abuse, in the fact that you have to walk through this, you have to live in this particular environment. So we strongly believe that, you know, your environment has a big, huge influence on who you are and how you respond. So yes, so that's the kind of down part of the single occupancy rooms in the downtown area. As far as education in this model, after they go through the different, the COMPASS and the ITRP, they determine whether or not the student may need anger management, or whether they need domestic violence, or thinking for a change is a model that they use, for evaluating whether they're thinking, how they're thinking, and making better decisions. It kind of helps them motivate. It kind of helps them to change the way that they've been thinking and take a look at things from a different perspective. and they get a chance to practice it day by day by change, because the change is gradual. You implement these steps each day and you see if it works, and it does. We have documentation that it does work. The other piece that they also decide whether or not a student should be participating in it is seeking safety. And seeking safety is a trauma-focused type of curriculum, because as we know that our students have experienced a great deal of trauma inside incarceration, inside institutions, and for the most part, a great deal of trauma before they even were ever arrested. So this has also been a tool used by probation for their population and some of our students. Now, the question is, where are we going to live upon release? This is what a person is asking himself while doing time, while incarcerated, and you're starting to get close to release. And now the question is, I've just shared a couple models, but the question is, where are we going to live? So housing for system-involved persons require county, state, or federal probation approval. Having a viable housing plan can help with parole eligibility, because they're going to ask you, where are you going to live? There are formal and informal resources that incarcerated people use to research and attempt to secure housing. Examples for formal resources are Getting Out, Staying Out. It is a resource book for people leaving jails and prisons, published by San Francisco Adult Probation Reentry Department. Also, any pre-release team member or in custody correctional officer should have reentry housing information. You can normally begin there. Another way to find the best reentry model for you is by using informal resources. Usually the first source of information will come from the Prison Evaluation Network, also known, AKA, as the Prison Grapevine. It is based on what people say about the program on the yard. Once individuals identify a program where they would like to live, they write a letter expressing interest in the program. Now, because of all the above and more, Fat Chance Community Services Incorporated was founded in 2007 in the city and county of San Francisco. We know how challenging it can be to find affordable housing. We have experienced rejection and reluctance from property owners concerning leasing properties to us. These properties could provide housing for folks returning to the community and decrease the number of homeless persons. We understand how some uninformed folks in the community can only imagine the worst when we mention formerly incarcerated people. Oftentimes, their only contact with our population has been horror stories in the local news. But we believe by surrounding folks with positive people that will support them in their reintegration to the community, that it'll make all the difference, because it's a family atmosphere. It's someone that can relate. You don't have to be afraid that they're going to bring up whether or not you've been incarcerated, and you don't have to feel ashamed about where you've been, because it's not about where you've been, it's where you are and where you're going. This is where we're focusing on today at Fat Chance. We treat our students with integrity. We provide keys for the front door and to student rooms. So we don't lock you in. We don't want ever to give you the impression that this is an extension of prison, because it's not. We want you to feel, again, like family. We have established 1 or 2 man rooms. We don't have dorms, and make it. And the reason that we established the 1 or 2 man rooms, it makes it easier for you to study. And it also makes it easier for you to sleep in preparation for work or school, according to your schedule. It's very important for us that we have enough space per student for them to feel comfortable and that they can function within this environment. We don't ever want them to feel crammed on top of each other. And we definitely don't want them, especially now, even more so, that with the medical concerns, we definitely want to remain compliant with distancing, safe distancing. Also, we asked our students to, we call them agreements. They're not rules. We have certain agreements. And one of them is that we stress respect. Respect for yourself and your peers. And we tell them, here you got access to a kitchen and you prepare your own food. We have laundries, washer and dryers on site. And we are accessible to public transportation, usually within a couple blocks, to make it convenient. So you don't have to wander off again in different neighborhoods that's not necessarily conducive to positive growth. We provide a safe environment so that when your PO decides to drop by for that site visit, we don't want the neighbors intimidated and we don't want you to feel uncomfortable. So what we do is we provide an area that you can meet with your PO discreetly. And you guys can engage in the conversations that you may have. This has been very successful in our model too. The POs feel comfortable, the student feel comfortable. They have an area they can get together and discuss legal obligation. Also, as one of our graduates stated recently, as we provide an environment, that's Fat Chance, provide an environment that help you develop skills to become independent. And we discourage system dependency. And that he couldn't have said it better. So it's our opinion that a house is not a home. One of the important things about designing a housing modality is that it can help pave the way for acceptance by the community. We want a building to continue to serve the people who live in it, and we want it to serve the neighborhood. If it does both, we consider it a win-win. And then the house does become a home. Thank you.
Right on, G. Yeah, don't give them too much, because I want to hear from these students. I bet you there's going to be some serious crossover about their personal situations in line with that. I want you to, because I know you didn't get too deep in the woods on how you even came to realize the importance of housing and your personal experience.
No.
So Sonny, I think, can you kind of lay it out for the panel?
All right, well, to start, I want to thank all of our students. There's 5 of you that have agreed to be on this panel. I do want to recognize that your participation comes at some personal cost. So I want to acknowledge that educating others about oppression often falls to those that are being oppressed. A little over a year ago, when Dr. Watson first started talking about justice impacted, I actually had no idea what that term meant. And despite 20 years of experience in higher education, I really didn't know very much about the barriers for students that have a record of arrest or conviction. And so I really actually have to say the students you're going to hear from today have really broadened my understanding. And I want to thank each of you in advance for your significant contributions to my ability to be a better higher education professional. On the very first day of this institute, I talked about Jason Scott, one of our PhD students and instructors in the Department of Sociology, who's persistently brought the challenges facing students that are justice impacted to the attention of administrators, of faculty, and of staff. And I credit Jason Scott for being the major reason that Dr. Watson formed our task force and why we're here today for this institute. Okay, so I've shared these questions in advance with each of you, and I do want to remind you not to share anything that you're not comfortable sharing in a public forum or that is recorded. And I will also recognize that in order for all of you to tell your full stories, we would need the entire day. So I want you to share what you want to share and recognize that we are trying to get through a lot of content within the next hour. So, but to get us started, I will read off the questions to you. We've pre-identified which of you will answer each of these questions, so I will call on you when it's your turn. So please introduce yourself and why you chose to pursue your particular degree at UNLV. And during your brief introduction, please, you're welcome to share any parts of your story that you want to share with the group. So to start us off, Jason Scott.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending the Institute. It means a lot to me and my colleagues at UNLV. 12 years ago, I was labeled a felon by the criminal legal system. I was convicted of a cannabis offense, and I was unable to find a job, which was part of my probation agreement. I find myself very fortunate that I'm not formally incarcerated in the sense that I serve time in a penal institution. However, I view the carceral state as something much broader than that. Although we warehouse over 2 million people behind bars, we should multiply that number by 3 or 4 for those that are under some sort of community corrections sentence that they're given. So I wasn't able to find a job, so I inquired about going to school. I had a very sympathetic probation officer. I applied to graduate school. At a Midwest institution, I got accepted into a sociology program. And I was excelling in the program, and I was transferred to a different PO. And when I was telling my story, I indicated I had a graduate assistantship. And it became an adversarial relationship at that point in time. I was told, does my program, do they know that a criminal is receiving a graduate assistantship? Did I lie on my financial aid forms? And one of the most humiliating things I ever experienced was during that meeting, a call was made to my graduate director to inquire whether or not they knew my status as a felon. Fortunately, the graduate director didn't open, but she never approached me after that. And I didn't have the fortitude to go to her and explain my situation after that. So I had this adversarial relationship. I received my master's degree, and I was looking into PhD programs, and I came across the work of John Irwin, the founder of Project Rebound. John Irwin is also known as the father of convict criminology. And I had reached out to members of this group, and I had some guidance from Stephen Richards and Dan Murphy. And they told me that graduate school and a PhD is a real possibility, but it's going to be a very difficult road to follow. So I decided to pursue my academic, I decided to pursue higher education because I wasn't able to find gainful employment with a felony conviction. I applied to multiple graduate schools, but UNLV didn't require me to go through a criminal background check. And to be fair, that's one of the reasons why I applied to UNLV. But historically, Las Vegas is a city where people go to reinvent themselves. So I viewed Las Vegas and UNLV as an opportunity to reinvent myself in a new environment. While at UNLV, I excelled academically, but I stayed under the radar. I didn't disclose my status. I was awarded the Outstanding PhD Student Award in the Department of Sociology, and I won several different competitive research fellowships, all with nobody knowing my status. And part of my graduate duties was to teach sociology and criminology courses. And as an educator, I believe that it's important to build rapport with your students to make them feel vulnerable enough to express their intersectional identities and to share personal elements in the class. That way we can translate theory into the real world. And I noticed over the course of several semesters, I would have individuals come up and tell me that they're on parole or they're on probation or they were a convicted felon and they were having a difficult time navigating the academy. And I wanted to let them know that they weren't alone on campus. And a question that I always asked was, what type of resources are you receiving? And I noticed another common trend. When they would divulge their status to somebody, they would get a sympathetic response, but nobody ever followed up with them. And that was their one and only opportunity that they gave to reach out to somebody. And I viewed the various privileges that I have and had accumulated to use that as a way to break down some barriers that we face as justice impacted students. So I went to my department, my college, outside the college, and explained the situation and the need for resources for justice impacted students. And I was fortunate enough to meet Dr. Renee Watson and Sunny Giddens, and they have single-handedly restored my faith in higher education. They've lessened the oppression that I and other students have endured at UNLV. And through their help and guidance, I was able to co-found a peer mentoring program at UNLV, where we have other individuals that share my experience, but individuals that have different intersectional experience, those of different races and genders, those that may have been incarcerated in a penal institution. So we bring our varied experiences together, and we use that as an opportunity to help each other create a playbook in terms of what works and what doesn't work in terms of guiding our way through higher education. And what we hope to do is educate staff and faculty members on what we experience and what they can do to help us, both in the academy and beyond.
All right, thank you, Jason. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Jason is conducting a job search at UNLV. So if those of you that have positions are open and you see the application, you've had an opportunity to get a preview of Jason Scott. All right, next, Kevin, can you introduce yourself? See, Kevin, you might be on mute. And JR, do you want to pin Kevin? All right, well, Kevin was on the call earlier. We will come back to Kevin if they are able to join us. But Askia, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
My hand was shaking. I don't know why. I was like, can I read something before my introduction? It'll just take a second, really. Is that okay?
Yes.
Søren Kierkegaard and D.H. Lawrence were men who lived in and wrote with insight on the same condition in different ways. While the former experienced fear and trembling, dread, and the threat of despair, the latter looked into the eyes of adult pleasures and their sensibilities and understood the importance of dying without regrets. When I went to prison, I became literate. I mean, I knew how to read, but I became a reader. And I still get excited reading. And I'm in my, where I should be writing my dissertation, I still read. That's why it's taken me so long. And this group is amazing. I have to say that. I think school or academia gives you access to these type of minds. I know I'm in a space of educated people because you don't hear intersection outside of it, you know, so it creates a vocabulary as well. I go out and talk about subjectivities and everybody thinks I'm tripping. And I do want to acknowledge that indigenous group that was here before us that were violently removed from their land. I respond to he, him, his, 5th year doctoral student. My work is on the intersection of Black American Muslim males and education. And I'm interested in their attitudes and perceptions or perspectives on higher ed, those who didn't go to school. And one thing I'm proud of, is that the right word? I say with all humility, I teach at the College of Southern Nevada, a community college, and they just approved a program where I'll be teaching all the Black boys that come into school. And I have the autonomy to create the curriculum and the books. And I said, I just need one book, The Miseducation of the Negro, and just let me add them. So, but going back to, I believe, is it Dr. Levy? And I love hearing you guys speak. This whole thing for me has been about addressing the trauma. The byproduct of the master's degrees and the PhDs, I'm just here trying to deal with all that past. And I still haven't dealt with it because it's just continuous. Since I've been in school, I've been looking for somebody with a background like me to say, can you believe we here? I have not found one. That's how my journey has been. It's been a very lonely, alienated journey. A lot of tears when you look up and there's no one. I say this, I can say this. If I wanted to do, and I hope I didn't say it before, if I wanted to do something wrong, I still know people a phone call away that I could have access to. I mean, whatever you can imagine. But I was crying one day not too long ago because I didn't have anybody to help me with statistics. I was like, there's nobody I can call. I mean, literally in front of this computer with tears in my eyes, and this is tragic, you know. But I made it through. It's about literacy to me, literacy, and when I say literacy, reading everything, addressing the trauma. And I always say this: the people I know and the background I know dealing with persons that are formerly incarcerated, one has to continue to be a gangster to navigate this hot ivory tower. And we have to redefine gangster. We have to dig ditches. We have to do everything we can. I know I slept in places where I had to pull the roaches off of my face when they were crawling over me to get to where I am today. But it was, you do what you have to do. You know, anything other than weed is legal now. Pick up a weed sack, a cocaine sack, pick up a gun. That's when you fall for, you know, that's all you have. But I hope I gave it who I am. How's that? I'll answer the questions that are coming.
Great, thank you. All right, Elgin, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about why you chose a degree at UNLV?
My name is Elgin Lofton. You know, I guess my story is a little bit different in a sense that I attended UNLV over 30 years ago. However, I came to UNLV as a student athlete. And just like myself and many other student athletes, we came as athletes back then, and that's how we proceeded. We didn't come as students. We got scholarships to play football. And the academics didn't come to our house and recruit us. And athletes look at it today, and they ought not to. However, though, that's the kind of pressure, because we give the most time on the football field than we do in the classroom. We all know what, as far as what the money brings in, everything's about money. And so those things move forward. So it's not like I didn't care about education, but on my list, it was definitely second. And now moving forward, I go to the penitentiary. I do almost 16 years. What I will say about prison for me and in the penitentiary, that's the best thing that ever happened for me. A lot of people don't want to admit it or whatever. And I look back and I say, my first marriage failed. I didn't really get to raise my kids because I was gone that time. But the person that I have come to be because of that rock bottom. Sometimes it takes a lot of people rock bottom. For some people don't need rock bottom. They just need just a little thump, and they can get back right. I needed a hammer to hit my head. I needed to fall out, be on my back, and cry out. And being in that position, that was the position that got me where the only way I can look was up. So now moving forward and coming home, I was blessed. I was one of those that still had family around. because getting out, you need people, you need help. You can do all you can and prepare yourself and read your books. However, though, if you don't have help, or you don't have anyone that want to come out and assist you or help you, there's no, it's difficult. And that's why the recidivism rate is so high right there, though, because people it's easy to go back and say, I'm going to go back and I know what I can do. So I give this a first chance, and the second chance, okay, man, F it. Kind of like move forward when it comes to that. Now, when it came to me, though, as far as I went back to UNLV, which I would have never probably hadn't gone to. And I was like, well, I'm only 2 classes short. That's what I remember from before I left. And so I said, okay, I'll go back up there. And I speak to a counselor, and she said, well, it's not 2 classes anymore. It's 27 years later. And I'm like, huh? So, and I'm like, well, what is it? And she was like, well, it's not that bad either, though. And so she says 13 classes. And I was like, shit, 13. 13. Huh. And I'm like, and I said, and I'm thinking to myself, I got to do this on my own. Because again, as you know, as an athlete, it's pretty much, you got tutors. As an athlete, it's really handed to you in a sense. And so I was like, I gotta do this on my own. I've never been a student in my life on my own. And so here I am. I'm like, and then the funny thing was, my major was criminal justice, cool figure, criminal justice, So, but anyway, I moved forward, and going back to my brother, piggybacking off him, the hardest class in my life in criminal justice is 301. It's a statistics class. Oh, well, I already know what you mean. Still to this day, and I say, like, I never want to see nothing like that again. So I end up graduating and getting my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And the thing about it, though, my GPA, it was so funny, but the GPA was like a 1.8. And she said, you're going to have to get a 3.5 for 13 classes. I still don't know, by the grace of God. By the grace of God, because I've never been that type of student ever in my life, though. So I did that, and so now it's moving forward to social work. So they kind of go together, but more than anything, what happened is that at criminal justice, I had an individual that told me, he said, like, okay, you can get you can go ahead and do the master's in criminal justice if everything works itself out. But however, you're gonna have less. You won't have as many possibilities if it was social work. And so I'm in a position now where it's just like I want to have as many options as possible in anything in life. Even if I don't like all the options, I still want every option that I possibly can have. But with social work and criminal justice, especially at our university at UNLV, they go together as urban affairs, the same building, they kind of hand in hand. And so, everything is it's pretty much working out. So in a sense, I'm still kind of walking by faith and not by sight, but I know that I'm going in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Elgin. All right, Dawn, are you on the call still? You ready to introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm here. I'm gonna leave my video off if y'all don't mind. My mom's in surgery and I've been up all night, so I look a mess. But so I ended up at UNLV. I started my degree, like Elgin was saying, a really long time ago. I think it was 17 years ago, because it was when my oldest was a newborn, at community college. And also I was focusing on criminal justice because, I had been a criminal. And I saw the need, because I had dealt with PO and just people who didn't care, that were more interested in seeing us go back to jail. And my criminal stuff started when I was a teen. I left home at 13 and went to jail in 5 different states, spent 4 different Christmas in juvenile halls. And that's actually my first college course that I took was when I was in jail. I got my GED and took a writing course. And that's what made me want to go to college. And so I started working on criminal justice, but then I had this sociology professor named Mrs. LeCoe. And it's funny because I couldn't remember her last name, only her first name. And so I was looking it up while I was on this call and just found out she died. So I wanted to, give props to her because she inspired me to love sociology, because she loved sociology, even though she told me not to pursue it because there was no money in it. But my passion is my passion, and I'm used to poverty. I spent a lot of time in juvenile halls, and luckily as an adult, I didn't go to prison. I got charged with hindering prosecution. I lied to a cop about someone's name, and they charged me with 4 felonies for that. I ended up taking a plea bargain for 2 misdemeanors. And because of a clerical error, someone didn't mark a box on the paper that said it was a misdemeanor. I spent 8 years with a felony on my record, and, couldn't get housing. I was lucky enough, well, not lucky that my mom's disabled, but she moved in with me because she needed care, and we were able to use her name for the lease. But it was a struggle because I couldn't put my income because I couldn't be on the lease. I got turned down for jobs at Denny's. I mean, I couldn't find anything. And I think that is a big part of why I'm struggling the way I am now. Just not being able to get any traction during that time. And then I came to UNLV, and also, like Elgin said, I had the same, I thought, oh, I'm not that far away from my degree, but most of my classes didn't count anymore because they were lost in transfer, or there was so many years had gone by. And now I'm to the point where I've maxed out my lifetime Pell Grant and still have at least a year of school left. But I got, professors like Jason that are seeing my potential, I guess, and making sure that I keep pushing no matter how tough this semester has been. And it means the world, because it's so easy when you're in the situation and when you're struggling to just give up. And that imposter syndrome is nuts. And I think a lot of us have dealt with that, like we don't belong here. So I'm hearing myself in a lot of your stories, and I appreciate that. I'm just a single mom of 3 over here working on my degree and trying to overcome the loss of time, because of the record. And that's me.
Oh, thank you so much, Dawn. Okay, our next question for you is, as a person impacted by the justice system, what doubts did you have entering the university? And now that you are currently navigating this space, what doubts persist? So, Askia, do you want to start with that? And am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Askia, you said it beautifully.
All right.
The doubts, when I came up into higher learning, the doubts were not, was I supposed to be there? Just, I remember I was in an English class. Trying to get this right. I was in an English class and we were looking at Shakespeare, and I hope I didn't tell this story, I get redundant. We were reading Shakespeare about 11 o'clock, and I was the only African-American, a Black in the department. And I just stopped and said, is this what you guys been doing for the last few hundred years? I mean, just in the middle of the day, reading Shakespeare, and just, that's what I have been finding amazing, and again, not having anyone to really do this thing with. Now, there are no doubts. This is, I tell especially my Black students, if you know the 13th, 14th, and 15th, and 16th Amendment, you don't need anything else. And being a citizen, I belong in the university. That's how I come to that realization. I belong here. I just need to finish this dang dissertation. But there are no doubts. So I hope I answered it completely, because.
Elgin, what about you?
I guess for me, the thing that that concerned me the most, or I was most apprehended about, was probably just being able to go to class and compete with students after never really being a student. I thought, I knew when I came home that this laptop thing was just, was mind-boggling. I knew when I came home. I mean, even just the phone. I mean, there wasn't no iPhone when I left, and then all of a sudden, iPhone 9 is out, and it wasn't. I mean, it was like I missed a lot. I missed a lot. So I was intimidated. I was scared. I didn't think I believed there, belong. But again, it's having people. It's having people around. Having those who can help you, having those you can be patient with, and then trust. After being locked, living that penitentiary life, you have to become someone you haven't been in a long time, and that is the hardest thing. And what I mean by that, all of a sudden, you have to share and trust and believe, they're all for your highest goal, and so that was all those things were just really, really tough for me. So just to bring it all the way back up, just knowing that you belong there, knowing that, and being patient with yourself, that's probably what's the most difficult thing for me.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of you sharing so much information with us. Okay, next question. Without naming names, can you share a specific experience you've had on the UNLV campus that highlights a challenge that is unique to justice impacted students? So Jason, I'll have you start off with this one.
I went to a job fair a few years ago, and I bought a suit I couldn't afford. I had a copy of my CV and resume with me. And when I went to the table, I asked, are any of the employers here felon friendly? And I got a cocked head and a smile, and I felt as though the individual thought I was joking about this situation. And that moment, the imposter took control of me. I felt as though I didn't belong, and I left. So I think that's unique to justice impacted students, because the idea that we're academics, the idea that we're scholars, the idea that we're good citizens and can contribute meaningfully to our community often isn't in the mindset of individuals. There's a very stereotypical viewpoint, I think, that is applied to us. And we need to extinguish that. As Roberta said last session, she said there are dream extinguishers out there. And I think we need to overcome that. So that would be my experience at UNLV. But to be fair, I've had a lot of fantastic interactions. But that's one unique situation I think justice impact students endure.
Thank you. Don, what about you? Do you have a story?
I think in general, just not knowing what I'm doing. I come across so many students that have been prepped for this. Their parents are helping pay for school, or they have scholarships, or they went to high school. I went to high school for a grand total of about 2 weeks, because one of the times, I kept running away and I'd been arrested, I think in Houston, and sent back. And I stayed for a little while and went to high school, and I had the same imposter syndrome there, like I don't belong here, and ended up taking off. And so coming into UNLV with no high school experience, I didn't know what I was doing. I had a GED that I got in jail. And, even now, like I hear people talking about stuff, or I'll be chatting with my, with other students in the class, and they'll be talking about, groups or whatever. And I have no idea what they're talking about. And I don't, even a lot of the resources on campus, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing, or whatever it is. I just kind of, I guess, I feel like I'm doing bare minimum, just trying to get through instead of utilizing everything, because a lot of times I just wasn't aware of it, just because I didn't have that, that preparation.
All right, Askia, what about you? Do you want to talk about a specific experience you've had on the UNLV campus?
The one that comes to mind, I obtained my master's in 2015 and my bachelor's, I think, in 2010. I took a class as a PhD student. So this is 4 years after that, maybe, on the school to prison pipeline. I had never told anyone that I was in prison. So I held that secret that long. And it was painful to hear all these people theorizing about prison and school to prison pipeline. And I came home and I didn't sleep for days, literally, and had to call my professor and said, I got to let everybody know, because this is painful. And it really made me think about a person that is, and I want to say it correctly, a person that is maybe gay or heterosexual or lesbian that can't tell who they really are. It made me think about that. And I said, now I understand, because that was painful. And I had to kind of come out and say, I was incarcerated for some years and I felt free. Now I don't have, thank God the world is opening up for people like me. That's the beauty of this thing. And it's sad that I'm at the end of the program and this is happening. But that was a painful experience that, that I can recall.
I want to talk a little bit about the Justice Impacted Peer Mentor Program. So Jason Scott was able to apply for funds from the Minority Serving Institution Student Council to get this initiative started. Kevin Wan, who was one of our students that seems to have had some tech difficulties, they were here earlier, but wrote a letter of support for this program. And so this really just started in March, pretty new initiative on our campus. But I want you to all talk about your involvement in the Justice Impacted Peer Mentor Program, how that's benefited you, and what you're hoping to accomplish with your involvement. Jason, let's start with you.
First and foremost, the goal is to let fellow students know they're not alone in dealing with the oppression that happens to be within higher education. We have shoulders to lean on, we have stories to tell, and just as important, we have techniques that allow us to successfully navigate difficult situations within the academy. I've consulted with Askia on several occasions in terms of getting students to be comfortable in the classroom, to divulge information. He's also a doctoral candidate, so we get to share our success and roadblocks. And I didn't have this opportunity in the past to do this with many students as a peer. In the past, where I was the instructor, I had students coming to me for advice, students asking, how do I deal with this situation? And I always felt as though I had to have an answer, and I didn't always have them. And it was difficult for me to let them know that. But what I did do is let them know that they're not alone. There are people that are there to help. There are services available, and I'll do whatever I can. So when it comes to the peer mentoring program, it means to me a collective effort to view our demographic as a diversity, inclusion, and social justice issue.
Thanks. Dawn, what about you?
It's just been, I guess I have hope for the future now, because I was just kind of floating around, and I was getting through the degree, but not, I just felt like once I got the degree, I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. And meeting Jason and becoming a part of this has just been inspiring and amazing, even though I'm definitely the least accomplished of the group and the biggest mess. I'm going through a lot this semester, but just knowing I have that support has been massive.
All right, I will say I have had the opportunity to meet with Dawn a few times this semester, and the number of things that Dawn is juggling is pretty enormous, with caring for her mom, her 3 children, balancing all of the school and unemployment and all of these things at the same time. So COVID, it's all come together, and I've been impressed every time I meet with Dawn. Amazing perspective and perseverance there. So kind of wanted to give you my own public shout out there, so that you know that I don't consider you to be the one with the biggest mess, but rather one of the students that have really shown some incredible strength. All right, our next question is, of the topics shared during this institute, what resonated with you the most and why? Elgin, do you want to start off? I think you might be on mute.
Okay. Yeah. You know, just kind of like go back just for a second with that peer question, since I'm just kind of like just getting in the group in a sense though. But I'm more so at a point now where it's just where it's just about giving back. And so now at a point now where, and you have to be at that place to be able, you know, you can't just say, I'm ready, I'm giving back. You know, you have to be at that place to be there to give back. So I'm feeling that I'm at that place. And I understand what you were saying in the beginning, as far as, you know, kind of like take a chance coming out with this and putting ourselves on the line or whatever. But it's that place again. I'm at that place where I just feel like it doesn't matter, because what God has for you is going to happen regardless, you know. And so I'm kind of there with that. Now, as far as the Institute, I enjoyed all the speakers the last few days. I kind of wrote some things down for the last couple of visits, but you know, I wrote down the first day, Dr. Amy Smith, and how passionate she was, and I didn't think anyone cared for us that way, you know, and that really touched me. I was impressed with Deborah Arthur and some of the things that she said. For only 4% going to college degrees. I just wrote like little notes down. You know, I was impressed with so many people. Gunnar Johnson spoke, and you know, I was at Lompoc with Gunnar and didn't know it, you know. So, you know, I kind of wrote that down. Eric Piero, Pipeline to Prison College. Martin Lea, he spoke on numbers: 6% learning disability, 68% recidivism at one point. From Rafael Martinez, Dennis Fennell, Brandon Butler, you know, Roberta Fox, you know, she reached out, you know, Jeff Dietrich, you know, I kind of just wrote down a little of everything, and everyone touched me. I thought everyone was impressive and didn't want to leave anyone out, you know, going back to, you know, even today with the Martin Lea and the George Turner. So yeah, I don't like to leave anyone out, because everyone is giving back in their own certain way, and I like to give everyone shout outs. Thank you.
Thanks. Askia, what about you? What happened during the Institute that resonated with you?
What happened during the Institute? After you obtained a graduate certificate in social justice studies, and when you start looking at all your positionalities, you have to privilege one, you know. And in my understanding of radical pedagogy, that the thing that is love. Love has to move us, but I'm a social justice advocate. That has to be our first vocation, regardless of what we are as professors, adjuncts, whatever. We have to be social justice advocates. That's first and foremost in my life, and everything else is a distant second. So when I want to say this, when I go to Clark County Detention Center, I hadn't been there since COVID, but and I think we said this before, so I don't mean to be redundant, the brilliant minds that are there is tragic. And I just want them to know education is always an option. Again, cases are different because we need access to those minds, not the criminal minds, but the brilliancy in the mind. Because people were doing these things as a form of resistance. They just didn't understand it. I know, I'm speaking from my own positionality. We do these things. So yeah, it was really about just the social justice advocacy that has me moving that I took from school.
All right, Jason, what about you? Do you want to comment on the Institute so far?
I think everything has been fantastic, and you're putting us in a difficult situation to pick one over the other. So I want to let all the presenters know that you've done an absolutely amazing job. With that said, there are three areas that truly mean a lot to me because they've been my talking points over the years. And Sunny, you know, because I've come to you countless times about this. I think what Doris and Rafi said about admissions and financial aid and academic advising and mentoring, what they said can't be stressed enough. It's extremely important. And I think Brandon Butler did a phenomenal job in terms of what can be done with career development, both within the university and what can be done with city, county, and state resources as well. And then today, I was moved by what George Turner was talking about, what they're doing in San Francisco, not just with those that are formerly incarcerated in terms of those warehoused in prisons, but also those that are being warehoused within the communities in which we live. So I think for me, those are absolutely moving areas, and I think all of them deserve a tremendous amount of credit for what they told to us.
So one of the goals that the UNLV Justice Impacted Task Force has had with this institute is that we would like to develop our own UNLV action plan and develop some new initiatives that would better serve justice impacted students. So when you consider, like my question to you is, what would you consider to be key services or initiatives, excuse me, that UNLV should work toward? And I will start, Dawn, with you.
I was excited about this question. So I think a big thing is basically advertising, that students know it's available. You know, just to basically be like, if you're justice impacted, contact us, you know, or here are the resources available. I think it would be great to have people that we can come to, because we might not even know the help we need. Like I said, I am not or you know, wasn't aware of a lot of the resources available. So maybe someone we can just sit down and talk with and say, these are my challenges. And, you know, because that's happened to me with Jason, where I've, you know, talked about something and he suggested something that I wouldn't have even thought of. So not even being able to come and say, hey, I need this, just being aware of the resources that are available and having an advocate to talk to about that. I know, Sunny, you and I have talked about childcare. I think that's a huge thing, because when I was at Portland Community College, when I started, that's how I was able to go. I asked if there was childcare available, and they said absolutely. It was a simple application. There was no wait list, and I was able to drop my baby off and go to classes. And I don't think I would have gone to college or been able to if that wasn't available to me. Another question I had is, do we have any sort of recruitment program basically for people in juvenile halls and jails and prisons? Because again, when I was in juvenile halls, someone came to me and said, hey, you know, you can take classes while you're here. And I don't think I would have ever considered college without that. I think if that wouldn't have been suggested to me going to college isn't something I would have even thought possible. So I think that could be a good thing.
All right, I am taking notes as you all are talking, but then I realized I needed to put myself on mute because you all probably could hear me typing away over here. So these are fabulous responses. I appreciate all of your input there. Askia, do you want to answer this question next about what UNLV needs to work towards?
Mental health. And when I say mental health, someone who's qualified. I went to, and I'm not, CAPE is a good program. UNLV, give me a second. I tell my students to visit UNLV. They have the wellness center. They have this state of the art. They have all this to say, come in here, don't leave, and leave the best you can be. You know, everything is here for you. So spend the next 4, 8, 12 years. But I remember I went to speak to, they offered some free psychological services. And I went to talk to the young lady, and I think back, she probably was a PhD student, but she really wasn't ready for what I was bringing. You know, she was like, damn, your situation is bad, or, you know, like that. And I said, you better get somebody qualified that can really empathize with what I experienced. You know, when you talk about incarceration, addiction, and divorce, and all the trauma, you know, so somebody qualified, somebody's coming up out of psychology with a background like mine that looks like me and knows how to go in there and really interrogate these things. So mental health is what I would recommend.
All right, good perspective there. Jason, what about you?
There are two things that I strongly recommend UNLV to consider moving forward. The first is academic advising and mentoring, in the sense that there's an individual points of contact, a person that's well-versed on these issues, perhaps a justice impacted individual themselves. The other thing I would recommend is career development. Provide not just job placement, but an internship. Allow individuals from our community to get gainful employment. Background checks are very difficult. Even with a sealed record, you're hoping that the background check company is disseminating accurate information. A lot of times they're not. I can tell you that from personal experience. Having a record sealed is good in theory, but it doesn't always work out in practice. So with career development, create some leads to where we can have internships and perhaps a path to employment.
And Elgin, what about you? What would your thoughts be on what UNLV should work towards?
Wow, I guess everything I heard pretty much makes sense though. But what I will say about the number one is I'm in agreement as far as with the mental health aspect. After doing so much time, you know, you don't want to admit it, but you know, as we use the term burnt, you know, I come out a little burnt, and I can admit that. You know, a lot of times people don't want to admit it. You know, they think it's something bad or whatever. But you know, I don't feel how I felt before I came in. You know, I have been affected. The way I look at life is so much different, and you just you know, you're not all the way right. You know, fortunately, I see a therapist, and I will probably continue to see it. I don't see them as often as I used as previous, but I see my therapist at least once a month, and it's good to be able to go in and just talk to someone. And so for those who are just getting out and want to pursue their education, I think I think we ought to have a place where we can just, you know, get things out and talk with about them. The second part of that is just having as she was speaking, Don was speaking, like that marketing point. Because if you don't know it's there, you know, how do you know? How do you know? And so, and it's crucial that people know that they're not alone. That is just huge. It's because if once you meet somebody, I understand, brother, I understand, sister, I've been there too. And like all, you know, that cloud just started lifting. It was like, been there too. Okay, and it's not just me, you know how I'm feeling, you know, and so, you know, those two things are just so crucial to me as far as moving forward. Thank you.
All right, thanks all of you. That's been amazing information. I do, I'm going to do a short little plug on the Justice Impacted Task Force did create postcards and posters as part of our marketing to students and outreach that we have, resources for them that Dr. Harriet Barlow will be a point of contact for telling your story and referring people to resources on campus. So after the Institute, as I said, we are recording all of these sessions. I'm gonna upload everything into YouTube, and we're fixing the closed captioning. But by the end of next week, we will send everyone the links to all the Institute days. But also for those of you on the UNLV campus, I'll put in their information so that you can just reply to that email and let me know how many postcards and posters you want me to send you so that you can put them up in your office. That would be amazing to help start getting that word out there to students. And we are, of course, doing things through student orientation and welcome weeks as well for students. But I do want to give all of our student panels the opportunity to say any final words or thoughts that you want to share with the other participants of this institute. If there's anything else that you wanted to share that I didn't ask, now would be a great time to do that. So I won't call on people, but if you are wanting to share, just unmute yourself and go for it.
Can I go first?
Great.
I'm the first college graduate of my family. My daughter, Mecca, she's a rebel. She graduated. And my youngest daughter will be starting in the fall. So we're trying to close the gap. But the thing I had to say that. But the thing I wanted to say is, and I know it. I mean, I'm a father and a husband. I know the responsibilities we have. So when we ask these individuals to come into higher learning, we don't want to just promote upward mobility or anything like that and just promoting the status quo. Go back and fight social justice. Don't forget, that's what this is all about. Fighting oppression, you know. We don't need, I don't need that as far as all the things that come with opportunities with education. If you forget, then, you know, we could have done without that. So it's all about social justice. That's what I want to remind people.
Hi, this is Deb Arthur up in Portland. I would love to follow up on that briefly and just say thank you so much for that comment, Skia. I feel like, first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be part of this group. I've learned as much. I'm furiously taking notes over here. I'm learning as much as I feel like I had to share. So I'm just appreciative of the opportunity to work with you all. And I deeply apologize for missing the second day last week. I had something blow up with our program that I got called into some meetings for. But that piece about social justice, and earlier on, I put a comment in the chat about being careful about when doing good can cause harm. Here's an example to follow Martin in terms of the storytelling. There's another university in our state that is offering a 400 level seminar class to students in one of the prisons that by packet with no previous college experience required. And I feel like that in some ways that's problematic. The more educational opportunity, the better, but let's make sure that we provide the support and the scaffolding for people to be able to do well with that. And why not start with a 100 level lower division course? So sometimes there's these issues that come up in this work because it can be really heady, especially for people who don't have the lived experience, that can seem really cool and fun and look at this amazing thing that we're doing. But the focus always has to be back on the needs of the system impacted person and the social justice aspect. So I appreciate you mentioning that that's a really important part of the work. But I've loved being part of this with all of you, and I appreciate so much your wisdom and the work that you're all doing.
Sorry, I was on mute there. All right. Thank you, Deborah, for those comments. Are there any other students that wanted to, from the student panel, that wanted to share anything? And if not, I'll hand this back to Jason Bell, but I just wanted to check in.
You know, I guess I just wanted to add, I just wanted to just thank everyone. I think it's been a beautiful 3 days. I've learned a lot. I've written a lot of notes. I really have. You know, everyone had something to say, and it helped me. A lot of things I did know, but it just reaffirmed. And then you're such a blessing, not just doing what you're doing, but you also help me in a sense where I can bring it across and help others. I mean, like it was when Brandon spoke, I knew a lot of things that Brandon Butler was saying though, but it was just awesome just for it to, you know, to reaffirm those things and then go back out and shoot it out. Because where I'm working at now, I work with a lot of those who've been incarcerated in addiction. And it's important that, you know, brothers know that if they're done with the foolishness, and so I always let them know, that's if you're done. If you're done with the foolishness, we can move forward. You know, but if if you're not, you know, don't waste time. And we know when we're not, you know, and you know when you are. But thank you everyone deeply. Nothing went unnoticed. Thank you.
That's a perfect way to call it, because I know a lot of times when you're deep in the trenches, you all don't know that you are the pioneers in UNLV, and it takes some grinding. I have to admit, it's not going to always be easy, but like Askia, what you just talked about, that generational stuff, you broke the seal, and then you got family 2 generations behind you coming in and doing the same thing. Because for generations, we were going in the opposite direction. I mean, I'll just be honest. The 80s messed a lot of things, a lot of families up for a lot of people. And we are 30, 40 years of fixing that mess. But I think it was Don that talked about traditional versus non-traditional students. And that's a very real thing. And I didn't, you know, when I came face to face with it in line with telling a brief story, one time about maybe 7 years ago, we were called to Princeton University to do a panel. There's this organization called PD Green that does some mentoring in custody in some of the New Jersey prisons. And we did a panel, and what's the nun that they based that movie on, Dead Man Walking, she was there. I can't remember her name right now, and I don't want to butcher.
Prejean.
Yeah, Prejean. She was there, and we talked, and we had a great time, and we had this intermission. So a couple of us rebounders, we were walking the campus, and we had some time. We got a snack, and we saw some young folks, look like freshmen, maybe playing chess. So, you know, we sat down and said, you know, we'll kill some time and show them our little penitentiary chess skills and play some chess. And we're playing chess, and as I'm focused, you know, I'm digging in, and me and a comrade of mine named Ayrton Morales, and he's doing the same. He's playing another youngster on the side of him. We're focused, and they're talking. They're talking about, oh yeah, quantum physics and this and all kind of stuff. But deep in the middle of the game, the kid says, yeah, and I'm getting ready for my SATs. And I said, hold on, now I'm getting an ass whooping right now by a 16-year-old or something, right? This is what they're doing on Friday night. So you talk about the difference in like traditional college going forward. They were primed from an early age at 16. You couldn't ask me to be hanging out on the college campus. I'm doing something completely the opposite. But I said that was my brush with that face-to-face reality, that there is a difference. Like in that preparation and and the stuff that they were talking about was something completely different than anything I had ever seen in a young person like that. I'm assuming that they're already college going young people, but these are kids hanging out, getting all the information that they need to go to one of the best schools the US has to offer. And I couldn't go to the Bay Area and name 16-year-olds that are doing something like that. I said, this is a prime example of that difference. So we are that generation that's going to change the game for our folks and show them different ways. And we got to be there to educate them and groom them as early as we can to show them that it is a reality. I know we talked about imposter syndrome, but some of that comes from that historical, kind of opposition and going in the completely opposite direction, and generations of that. We showed them how to make some mistakes, but let's show them how to do something else. and that's just my 2 cents in line with the story.
Well,
We're almost at the top
yeah,
of the hour.
we are almost at the end of our time. I know I've seen so many comments. I've received so many emails from a variety of staff across UNLV, all with their heartfelt, like, this has been an amazing institute. Many of us have really learned a lot. I appreciate that not only did each of our presenters share concrete, useful information, but also a lot of you really shared a part of yourselves and your own personal story. And that really, I think, added to the value that many of us were able to take from the Institute. So appreciate all of you. And I know that we will be in contact with many of you as we move forward. So we appreciate any of those offers as well. I also really want to thank our student panel. You all were fabulous today. It's sometimes hard to speak up in front of others and tell your stories, and it was amazing. So as from a logistical point of view, I actually am going to say that, as I said, the task force is looking for input from all the participants here in terms of the action plan moving forward. So I am today or tomorrow to UNLV participants, I will send you copies of our postcard and our posters, links to our website, but then also a Google Doc that will be divided by topics that we had at the Institute, where there really is just going to be space for you to jot down like your thoughts of like, hey, these are things that UNLV needs to do related to each of these topics. And then even kind of another space where like, hey, it didn't fit one of these headings, but here's some additional things that needs to be put into consideration for the development of an action plan. So I will send that out. The Justice Impacted Task Force has a meeting next Friday, the Friday before Memorial Weekend, that where we'll be looking at some of that information and beginning to start talking about the moving forward with developing that action plan. So there'll be lots of opportunities for input there. And then, as I shared, everyone that has registered for this event, we will make sure that everyone gets a copy of these video recordings. I'll put them into YouTube so that it'll be really easable, shareable links. And while we definitely created the Institute for UNLV, I think it's going to be information that could be useful for a number of different institutions across. So we'll make that information available to other people. So that's all for our Institute. And it feels like I should be closing with some monumentous statement. So I will open it up if there was anyone that wanted to give a closing thank you. And otherwise, I hope that everyone has the great rest of your day. And thanks again very much to all of our presenters and Jason Bell for pulling all of this together for us. Much appreciated.
Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. And then, Sonny, we do have I put together a huge packet of information, some policy stuff, some on campus, some off campus, news records, brochures, all kind of stuff. But it's kind of content heavy. How would you have a Dropbox or something I could maybe load it on, or how would I get it to you?
Yeah, let's, you and I'll connect after this and I will figure that out. I'm not sure if I know the answer right away, but it'd be great if you could drop it and then we'll figure out some way to distribute that information as well.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Have a fabulous rest of your day.